one of the big steps in my life was my first transistor radio. First time ever I held a gadget in my hand that I loved what it could do. It brought me music. It opened my world up. I could sleep with it and hear music all night long, and music's become such a big part of my life. And I looked at my little radio, and it had 6 transistors in it, hand-built in Japan, but hand-built. And my dad worked in Lockheed. The only people that could afford the early chips and really spur this chip industry was the military and the very largest corporations, their needs for computers. So my dad had access to the companies in Silicon Valley that were about to make the first chips ever. And he took me to a show when I was maybe 8 years old, and I went there and I saw a gentleman presented a picture that showed little blocks and said, this is a picture that we're going to turn into a chip with 6 transistors on one chip, one piece of silicon. And I went home and I went to my dad and I said, wow, so they're going to make better transistor radios? And he said, no, these chips cost way too much. Only the military can afford them. After a number of years, there's surplus that they don't need anymore, and that's what people get. And I always felt, darn, you know, the needs of real people for things in their home that bring them enjoyment should be pushing our industry. Well, what is pushing the state of the art of the silicon industry nowadays? Personal computers, and now games. The highest, most powerful chips that are made on Earth are made for game machines, so the legacy of the little personal device has come true. I found a way to get the manuals for all the mini computers when there were no stores that sold such things. What I would do is go to Stanford Linear Accelerator Center on Sundays with a friend, and we'd drive in thinking nobody's there. And these smart people that work there, they always leave doors unlocked. So we'd always get into the main building that had a library, and I'd go to the library and read computer magazines you could never find in normal magazine stores, and there were little cards you could fill out and order the manuals for almost all the mini computers you see here. I'm a good designer. I designed my own 28 little $1 chips on a board. I had Pong playing on my TV set at home. Snaked the cable in, figured out how to do it. And eventually Steve Jobs came back and he took my game down to Atari and he got a job. Atari was in Los Gatos, California, where I live now. Very proud of that. So I used to go in and visit at night. They had Steve working at night so he wouldn't be around other people. Couldn't bad. And then he got us a job. I designed the first Breakout game for Atari. Yeah. So I didn't really work there. They tried to hire me, but I said, never leave Hewlett-Packard. I love my company. I'm loyal. Yeah.
You built that in one weekend, didn't you?
Breakout, 4 days. 4 days and nights. It was a half-man-year job. I didn't think I could do it. And we stayed up all night, all day, all night long. We both got the sleeping sickness, mononucleosis. Steve Jobs and I both got it doing that project. We delivered a working Breakout game. And it was one of the highlights of my life because I loved games. I loved things that young people do, children do. It related to my interest in education. And also it had a big impact in how I designed those game-like features into the early Apple computers, especially the Apple II, because games were going to come into computers. Game equipment like knobs and paddles and buttons and sounds were going to be an important part of computers, and I hope I had a little part in history in accelerating that. And then the computer gaming, as games became software, they took off to what we have today. And then Breakout gave me a starting point to build a little machine that could talk to computers on the ARPANET back in those days. And then that, plus my own little microprocessor, made the Apple I computer. So it was a real important step. I'm sure there would have never been an Apple company. Breakout, I designed it in hardware. That just means the chips were hardware. Mm-hmm. Chips connect voltages to each other, and the voltages go high and low and high and low. And if you set them up in ways that they go high and low at exactly the right times, you can cause dots to appear on a TV screen. So there was no software. You couldn't write a program to do it. You had to know how all the chips and the voltages worked to make a game back then. So Breakout was a hardware game, not a software game. It's a lot easier doing software. You can do it, you know, if you already know enough, you can do it in half a day. If you take a beginning introduction to computer courses in a lot of colleges, you will program Breakout in that course. If you think about these early computers we saw that they made very few of that cost, you know, billions of today's dollars for the military, those were very important steps to them, and all of a sudden we've lost a lot of control. We can't turn off our internet, we can't turn off our smartphones, we can't turn off our computer. How would we live a life without any of those things, you know, for the next 6 months or something? How would we, you know, cars without computers? So all of a sudden technology, we've just built it in to help us, but we're dependent on it. And eventually we're going to have it doing every task we can in the world so we can sit back and relax, but now we're not needed as much as the technology. So who's the master and who's the slave, I always think. But it's not like we designed these machines that would be intelligent enough to take over, like it happens by accident without us knowing what we're doing.